I want to kick off with that little bit there and play with it a bit. I'm going to read you a report that came out just in the last 24 hours. And former intelligence official and whistleblower David Charles Grush provided Congress and the Intelligence Committee Inspector General with a classified information regarding covert programs that have obtained craft of non-human origin. So here's a guy that was in the military saying that we've got craft that are of non-human origin. Grush alleges that this information has been illegally withheld from Congress and claims to have faced retaliation for his disclosures. The unidentified anomalous phenomena, formerly UFOs or UAPs, are reported to be of non-human origin based on morphology, material science testing, and unique atomic and radiological signatures of the retrieved materials. Grush's investigations have revealed that the retrieval and analysis of these materials has been ongoing for decades under the direction of government, its allies, and defense contractors. So he was a intelligence official when he came out to Congress and he's said, hey, we've got these down craft, we've been studying it for a long time, we've reversed engineered the technology, and here's what we've got to say about that. So I'm just going to share my screen with you and help you join a few dots, because you hear about these things from time to time, you see some footage from time to time, but it's very hard to join the dots. So let me join all of these dots for you so it makes sense for you. So I'm just going to share my entire screen here. There. So that article that I was talking about just then comes from this. So the debrief.org. And I'll put a link to this. I forgot to put a link to this as I set up the stream. So this is the fella here. That's David there. And that's the whole article. If you want to read it there, you can have a checkers of that. So let me join the dots for you with Dr. Stephen Greer. So you would have seen this fella before. He's somebody who created the Disclosure Project, and he created the Sirius Project, which was the search for extraterrestrial life. And that happened in the early 1990s. And he's got an event coming up. So they did a disclosure in the early 2000s where he got a big panel of scientists and whistleblowers to come out and sit with him at the National Press Club. And in the process, what they actually did was disclosed exactly what was going on with extraterrestrial technology and UAPs and everything. And it didn't receive all of that much attention. In fact, at that event, the deep state jammed his transmissions and prevented the transmissions going out. So in the last couple of months, well, I guess in the last 30 years of his career doing this, he's pulled everything together. But in the last couple of months, he's put the legal framework in place so people can actually come forward and not lose their pensions and not be in breach of any NDAs that they've actually signed. So joining the dots, what he's done is he's allowed people to come forward to talk about the technology that they've found and that they've worked on, and there's going to be no ramification for them. So he's got the legal framework to actually do that. So this is, if you come over to drstephen.greer.carter.com, and all of the links that I'm showing you here are already in the description. So I encourage you to pop down and have a little bit of a looky-loo at that. So this is a disclosure. It's a National Press Club event over a period of a couple of days, so June 10 and 11, and then there's a new movie being launched called The Lost Century as well. So the idea of the press conference, it's explosive new disclosure witnesses and archives unveiled over a 2-day conference, followed by the Disclosure 2.0 at the National Press Club. So I've got Stephen Greer's link in the description below, so make sure you head on over to his channel. But I've also got a couple of videos that I pulled out for you. So this video here, and you'll see the link down below, is the call to action to join Dr. Greer's legal team. So he's been, Dr. Greer on the right here, and this fella here, Derek Garcia, he's a lawyer. So these two have been working together for about 15 years or 20 years or something like that, for a long time. And they've set the legal framework to allow people to come forward to talk about this. So why has this all been suppressed? Well, the reality of it, it's been suppressed because the black budgets that are given to government by Congress, that black budget is not managed by the military. It's managed by another level of deep state. And these are the people that really run the world. So these are the people that have the alien technology, that have the ability to have anti-gravity technology. They have unlimited sources of free energy from the 0 point energy. Think of the Nikola Tesla stuff. They've already mastered and refined all of this technology. And part of the disclosure in the next couple of days will be all of that information coming out. And it comes to a head about this new movie that's coming out called The Lost Century. If you head over to Dr. Greer's website here, just at Serious Disclosure, you'll see there's the trailer to it there, The Lost Century. And that kind of explains to you exactly why all of this technology has been suppressed and what it actually means and why somebody has done that. So what it says to me is alien tech is real. I don't know, have you ever seen a UFO, Ed?
I can't tell you that, Rob. I'd have to kill you. So
there's a picture of one of the disclosure events that they're going to talk about in the next couple of days. That's like the artist rendition of what some people saw. You've never seen one, all jokes aside?
No, I've never seen one.
You never seen one, really?
No, I've seen things in the sky that I didn't know what they were, but that's a far stretch from.
So when I was in the Persian Gulf in 1996, when I was in the Navy, we were enforcing the southern no-fly zone up against Iraq. So after the war ended in 1991, we pulled out. So they liberated Kuwait, destroyed the Iraqi army on the way out, and then we left, right? That was it. We weren't never going to invade, never going to drive tanks to Baghdad. That happened like 11 or 12 years later, whatever it was. So what had happened, as soon as we left that part of the world, all of the Kurds that were in Iraq tried to take the ground in the north and the south, because the Kurds had been a repressed minority, and they actually don't have their own country, but you know that they have that area, that part of Kurdistan in northern Syria, Syria and northern Iraq that bumps up against Turkey. And the Turks don't like them at all, right? So they see them as a real threat. Saddam didn't like them either. And after the war had ended, he sent his Air Force and all of his army helicopters down there to destroy the Kurds. And we said, no, you don't. That's why we established the Southern No-Fly Zone. If any aircraft, Iraqi or otherwise, fly south of this line on the map, we're going to shoot you down. And that's what we were doing. So we were enforcing the Southern No-Fly Zone, or the Navy was doing that at the time, and the Allied Air Force was doing that at the time. But we were also enforcing the sanctions against Iraq, because Iraq was still sanctioned. And I was on a guided missile frigate, and the draft of a frigate is quite shallow. It doesn't kind of go very, so in the Persian Gulf is pretty shallow. So we would go right up against Iraq to a place called the KAA. There's only one waterway that goes into Iraq, and we would sit there over the horizon about 10, 15 miles away with our radar outside of international waters. So we're never inside of Iraqi international waters or Iranian. And we would wait for the ships to come out of the KAA, and we would watch what they would do. And they would come out and they would turn left, and they would track along the Iranian coast inside of Iranian international waters, so you couldn't do anything. And then they would hide in all of the oil rigs that were there, and there was hundreds of oil rigs there, right? So it's really hard to see and disseminate on a radar. So you have to really watch what you're doing to make sure you're tracking them. And then at some point they would try and bust out of international waters and make a break for it, right? But we were over the horizon watching them. You could always see them. And then we would go pull them up, and we would board them and make sure they weren't doing anything wrong. And they were never doing anything wrong, by the way. The most illegal thing I think we found was a Mars bar wrapper and someone's like dashboard on a ship. In all jokes aside, there was nothing we found that was illegal. They weren't breaking any sanctions. But we were part of, there's a carrier battle group in the Mediterranean on the other side of Iraq, and there's a carrier battle group in the middle of the Persian Gulf. And there used to be U-2 spy planes that would fly above the top of Iraq. And so I'd sit down at the console and I would turn the radar all the way out to 512 miles. And we were in the data link with the carrier and the data link with the U-2. You could see all of these things, and you could see like the disposition of the entire Persian Gulf. And I can remember we were right up against the KAA, like 1 mile from international waters. We were like so close. And I remember dialing the radar all the way out and seeing an aircraft launch from the southern part, like around Bahrain, around the bottom of the UAE. I couldn't really tell because I can't tell. I can see the tracking on the radar from all of the Aegis system from the carrier battle groups. And I remember seeing an aircraft track out of there and track all the way up the Gulf, like up the channel, so to speak. And it's like 500 miles or something. How it was a long way that it came up, but it traveled that distance in, I want to say, a minute and a half. And I can remember thinking, that's not anything that we have. And thinking that, what on earth is this? So at the time, there's a lot of speculation about a program called the Aurora. And if you've ever seen Top Gun Maverick, at the start of it, he's flying in a fictitious plane called the Dark Star, a Mark 10 hypersonic aircraft. So the idea of the Aurora was something that replaced the SR-71 Blackbird, but nothing replaced the Blackbird. The Blackbird was replaced by spy satellites, right? So it's just a far more efficient way of doing something and spying on the enemy. But I swear to you that nothing in our inventory or arsenal, even today, 30 years later, could travel at that speed. And so